Hi, I'm Beck and I'm a property investor.
And I'm Daria. I own my own home and I'm curious about investing.
We're the hosts of Investors in the Wild.
We've heard it all before. Build your wealth, get expert advice, learn about high yield, high growth investments, blah, blah, blah.
That's just not us. We're real mates with real talk about real estate. No ego, no financial advice.
It's all about wins you can use right now.
Let's get into it.
Hi, it's Daria. We have had mixed reviews regarding buyer's agents, but we wanted to share an episode specifically focused on the experience of investing using buyer's agents. And for Shady and Dave, it means that some of their properties have doubled. So we really wanted to spend a whole episode hearing about how their buyer's agent operated so you can see how effective using a great buyer's agent can be. As you know, we love talking about our property type, and Shady and Dave are no different. They certainly have a type, which they refer to a few times as the 422, houses with 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2 car spots. They go for suburbs that are highly connected to infrastructure, highly likely to gentrify, and highly likely to attract long-term renters. This is their tried and tested recipe that they use and reuse. Listen up for more insights.
Shady, we're so excited to have you and Dave here. Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about yourselves?
I am American, born and raised in Texas, and Dave's Canadian. And we both met in South Korea in 2008 when we were teaching English in an after school program in Korea. But then we decided to move to Australia about 18 months later because it was not an ideal time to move back to the US and Canada during the global financial crisis. Australia had a visa for under 30-year-olds to come and work and live in this country. And we decided, let's do it. Let's do it for 1 year, and then we can go back to North America. And that 1 year has turned into 15 years. So we lived in Sydney for 15 years, thinking it'll only be 1 year. Married in 2016.
We started our investing journey in 2018, and we were at the ripe age of 33. So before then, hadn't really considered it, but that's when we started.
So we lived here for 8 years and
Wow.
then started investing in property. And we had our first child in 2020. But I particularly remember posting an Instagram post with our first baby, which was our first investment property in 2018. And I said, "Oh, I hope you'll grow. You're going to be our little nest egg."
I love that. I'm so excited because we haven't had a married couple on the show.
It'd be great to hear your investing timeline.
Yeah, sure. So in 2018, we invested in our first property. It was in Lara, Victoria. How did we choose that space? Well, we engaged a buyer's agent through the referral from the volleyball community who all use this person and who all seem to have growing property portfolios. And so we engaged her, and she lives locally, and she came over for tea and talked about what's our strategy, what does she help her clients with. And so the focus for us was finding a property that was going to grow for the long term. There was no view of selling it in any short term view. It was all about holding it until we wanted to retire. And what that means is retire from our corporate lives, maybe 60, 65. And so that profile looked like, let's get a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car space standalone house that a long-term tenant would be living in, a reliable long-term tenant. And typically that would be families because they would want to have a nice large land and house to live in, but they weren't prepared to buy it. They just wanted to rent it. So we asked her about where are the best places, and that's what a buyer's agent does. They do the research across different territories and areas. And she gave us 3 areas, and we chose that Geelong area in Victoria for our first property in 2018. Then we got pregnant in 2020, and I also moved roles. So I moved from my one role at Telstra to working at Amazon Web Services. And that also gave me a pay bump and a hopeful view of what my income could be for the next few years. And so we said, well, we've accumulated more cash again. I know that my new role is going to give me more money. So we're ready to invest again. And so we then invested in a place called Sippy Downs near Noosa in the Sunshine Coast. Again, using the same buyer's agent, we requested the same brief, long-term growth opportunities, areas where there's strong infrastructure investment and long-term reliable tenants. So again, we got a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car space house. And then in 2022, so this is now an every 2-year thing, I got promoted and Dave's gotten promotions as well. And so our cash is going up again and we're pregnant again with our second child. And we thought, okay, let's invest again. We're growing our family, we're growing our property portfolio. And so we asked the same buyer's agent again. We bought north of Brisbane in a suburb called Morayfield. And again, we bought a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car space. This investment was a little bit different this time because we did not use just our cash savings to put the down payment. We used the growth from our first 2 investment properties. So those 2 properties had grown in the 2 and 4 years that we owned it. And we then refinanced and took out a loan to then put the down payment for the 3rd property. So it's using the equity of the first 2 properties to fund the 3rd property. So this is now becoming a really interesting play for us because we don't necessarily need to have the cash because we have it in other ways through our first 2 investment properties to secure new properties.
So in the space of 4 years, sorry to interrupt, Shady, we
Mhm.
will go back to the timeline, but it sounds like in the space of 4 years, those first 2 properties accrued in value enough to then be able to buy a 3rd property, and you
Yes.
didn't need to dip into your savings anymore.
Yes.
Got it.
And those properties, we're looking at areas that have high potential for growth, but aren't necessarily the shiny, gentrified areas. So the amount to get into the market was lower. We looked at houses around the 500K mark. Now, if you were to try to go into those areas today, some of them have doubled. So we're very lucky and glad that we went for lower profile suburbs that had a lot of potential promise of growth.
And I want us to deep dive into that approach and understand how you decided on the areas and whatnot for sure. But just to circle back before, when you were saying a couple of things with the buyer's agent that you engaged, a couple of questions came to mind. One is you said that you went in with a brief. Did you develop this brief on your own? How did you know what you wanted before ever investing?
That's a good question because there's plenty of real estate assets that you can buy. Is it a unit? Is it a house? Where is it city? Is it regional? It was really guided by the buyer's agent. So she was telling us about the different types of investments that you can buy and the things that she found to be the best and most lucrative investments were these 422s, established suburbs with lots of growth around. So she was pushing that agenda. And when we first engaged her, we're like, we've got about 500,000 to spend on a property. What can that buy us? And she gave us the profile of these areas. So that's how it comes about. If we had $1 million to spend, it would have been different profiles. So it would have been different regions. But the price point that we had in mind, she sort of showed us the areas and the makeup. It was very heavily influenced by the buyer's agent.
Because of our friends. They were engaging in the same way with this buyer's agent. They were looking for the same brief. And so that's the only reason why we engaged her, because that's what she's an expert in, is finding these growth areas.
Yeah, but I think the golden nugget that came out of that experience is that you walked out of there with a brief that you could apply to all of your future investments. One great buyer's agent has inspired you. She has determined the future of the rest of your properties, right? Which was going to be my next natural question, which I think you sort of said you had the 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car space, 422. That came from the buyer's agent and not you, is that right? Why is that the secret sauce?
As Julia mentioned, our friends had sort of invested in that and they're seeing promise. But it also just made sense. We're a growing family. And we thought, where do people want to live for the long term? They want a house, they want a property, they want a backyard. They want to be close to the shops. They want to be close to other schools. And we resonate with that. We understood that is what people are looking for. And that's what people will always be looking for. On the flip side, you can say a 2-bedroom apartment in the city in Melbourne or something that has its own sort of dynamics around being a good investment. And you can always get high rent for that because it's highly sought after, but it might turn over more frequently. There's different sort of pros and cons to everything, but we were very comfortable with that long-term view with the 422 setup.
I think it really depends on your strategy and what you're trying to do. Another investor we had on recently, Anna, her and her husband's strategy is about buying apartments because they're very easy to lease, and they're apartments in quite high demand areas. So there are always tenants, never has a problem finding really good tenants. There's that steady cash flow. And then she actually pays P&I on her investments, so they get paid down over time. So I think it's different strokes for different folks.
And the best thing is that you go and take that leap and try something and see what works for you. We could have easily have bought an apartment and started going down that territory as well.
Can we maybe finish the timeline, Shady? So the last one was 2022. You're promoted at AWS. You're pregnant as well, then buy a house, another 422, and that's the first one you use the equity for.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. And so that's going great. We're like, wonderful. We've got 3 investment properties, but we have this growing family, and we got into a fork in the road. We're like, do we invest in another one or do we buy our own? And because of our cash flow and also our need as like thinking about, why do we live in Australia? What are we doing here? Well, we thought to ourselves, growing family, we're going to be here for the long term. Let's invest in our own property, our own principal place of residence. And so that fork in the road, we decided to take a left and buy our own principal place of residence. And we decided to live in the area we love, which is in Coogee and Randwick in New South Wales, where we've been living for the last 13 years. And that's been a different investment strategy. It's made us really think about how we're using our finances, because now we have a massive mortgage that we need to pay for. It's a bigger risk because our other properties were interest only mortgages. We're not paying the principal of any of those, whereas this one we have principal to pay. And so it's crunched our cash flow. We're really thinking about like, how do we pay off this place or pay down this place? But we turned back on the road. We've now bought another investment property through the cash that we've grown and through equity again, because of our 3 properties that have grown. So with a bit of cash and a bit of equity from the 3 properties, we have bought a 4th investment property this year in north of Adelaide. So a little bit different profile. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car space, but it's a really big 3-bed. In fact, it has an extra living space that could be a bedroom. So it potentially is a 4-bed, 2-bath, 2-car space using the same buyer's agent.
You guys have so many properties, you moguls. I love having some moguls on the show. It's fantastic. You mentioned before that you basically selected properties that doubled in value. What was your approach? Was it just luck, or was that part of the brief? Did the buyer's agent help you with that, or how did you identify the areas that you were going to invest in?
Yeah, it was the buyer's agent who would suggest the area, they'd suggest the street, and they'd suggest the property. We a lot of trust in the buyer's agent. And as I said before, with our first purchase, it was back and forth, many, many weeks and phone calls and chats for the first purchase. But for the last property that we've just purchased, we said, we're interested. And then she's like, here's the property. And given the experience that we've had with our buyer's agent, full trust, we just, yeah, all right, let's go for it.
It sounds like a miracle.
Yeah, she's great. Her name's Kate Hill. She's got a book out.
You could link to her. Her business is called Advisable.
When did investing go from you literally don't know anything, you're asking 1,000 questions, to actually I'm having fun here?
I think for us, it was once we got over the initial sort of fear factor with the first investment property, and we could see that, oh, we can actually manage this cash flow. Money's coming in. Yes, we're having to spend on new carpets or new blinds, and there's obviously the council rates and those sorts of things you need to pay for, but the cash flow was okay. And the property value was actually increasing. And I'd say it was probably when we bought the third investment property, it really started to become quite fun because we're like, hey, we're actually growing this. 2021 was a great year for property. Pretty much everything went up, which is what helped us buy that third investment property in 2022.
Especially
But
for houses, because it was
yeah,
tough,
for the houses.
especially for
Yeah,
houses. Yeah.
that's right. And so we thought this is quite cool now that we haven't had to put any cash in, and we're now secured another asset that's going to grow in value over time.
You mentioned that you started in 2018. What made you guys pull the trigger, and how long after deciding did you make the move to purchase a property?
We were working and living in Sydney and living our best life, going on holidays, going to restaurants, but we always had the same mindset around money. So it's something that bonded us together early on, that we were both frugal. We spent on the things that we deemed as worthwhile and things to spend on. We would save as much as we could. So from that point of view, we had the same mindset towards money, which was a great starting point. And then after a couple of years, especially as our jobs kept progressing and we kept getting promotions, we were sitting on a bit of cash. And we just looked at it and said, what are we doing with this cash? We're not spending it. We don't want to spend it. We want to think about our future.
Hi, this is Daria. Really importantly, Shady and Dave adopted a proactive approach of living frugally in order to build their savings. They didn't do it big. They didn't wait until they had it all before they started. They decided that they're going to live a certain lifestyle in order to focus on what was most important to them, and that was building their portfolio.
And then we started thinking, okay, well, what can we do with that cash? So funny enough, the first investment that we ever did was Bitcoin. So
Wow.
we heard some stories, oh, crypto's going crazy. So we thought, well, let's throw some money in there. And it was like very small, it was like $1,000. But it just switched on this thought of, hey, I can put my money into something that's going to have a future and it's going to move up and down and it can grow. And then we had some friends as well that were starting to look at investing, and our friendship circle was pretty crucial to us actually pulling the trigger on our first investment property. So my best mate, he has had a buyer's agent that he was engaging with. I was asking him about how that was all working, and he had great feedback from that. And we engaged the same buyer's agent, went through all the rigmarole of all the risks and understanding all of the things that are required for an investment property around securing financing and with tenants and all that kind of stuff. And that was all new to us. So we had a lot of questions the first time we went, and it probably took us about 6 months from when we first decided we'll get into it to then actually having a property. But lots of questions, lots of back and forth with the buyer's agent at the beginning.
What would be a big barrier to entry is just feeling like you're willing to take the risk. And for us, the first connections we made were our friends circles, the community we built. So moving to Coogee, for example, we were part of the Coogee Beach volleyball community. And so through Dave's best mate, who's in that community, that person had also had a friend in that community who did investing. And so now we were seeing examples of how people were using different kind of investing strategies within our close circle of friends. And so that leap to actually take on the risk was smaller because we could see other friends doing it. And so that made us feel more comfortable to enter into investing.
I feel like you
Have a couple of gold nuggets.
to reduce the psychological barriers. The first one was that first Bitcoin investment, like just $1,000 to be like, okay, we're now investing. And that's the first one done. And then the second gold nugget is it's become normal. you and your friends talking about it and you being able to ask questions. And I know, Daria, you've spoken about how important it is to have a space where you can just ask questions, and build those connections.
Yeah, 100%. It is really important on the Bitcoin. So I guess I'm just assuming that the Bitcoin investment, it was profitable, right? And so you saw so you dipped your toes in, as Beck mentioned, to reduce that psychological barrier, and then you continued to evolve. Is that right? It
Yeah.
was fruitful?
Well, it wasn't even fruitful. We just put money into it. It was also somebody who had said, "Oh, I have some mates who made some money off of this." So I thought, "Oh, let's go in." Um, and we didn't actually invest in Bitcoin itself. It was in other cryptocurrencies. But like Beck was saying, it was breaking that threshold because at that time, all we had was a savings account. That's the most we had in terms of generating income. And even chatting to some people within my company, some people are happy and that's like the risk they want to take. They're just a savings account. I can see the money go up. I know it's consistent. And a lot of people are okay with that. But taking that leap to then add the risk element was something that we just weren't familiar with or comfortable with. So that helped break that barrier down. And I still have it 7 years later. I still own the exact same crypto that I bought. And I've seen it go up and down. I've seen it go from $1,000 to $100 back up to $1,500. And I've been watching that wave. And it's incredible just to see that asset class and see how it moves. It opened up the doors to what else can we invest in.
Yeah, and I think that's to Beck's point. You've reduced the psychological barrier, which was the first question that I had around the whole Bitcoin investment. And then the second part was when you said that you generally were frugal in your spending. Both of you were aligned on that. Was that because you were planning to invest together at some point? Or so I just want to understand, was it the chicken or the egg? You had the money, so you invested, or you decided you're going to start to invest, so you started to build your wealth together to create a savings pool for you to then invest somewhere, whether it be Bitcoin or property?
We were just accumulating money, living sort of a frugal lifestyle, and our savings account was just ballooning up and was reaching sort of the 40, 50, $60,000 mark. And we were just thinking, surely there has to be something else that we can do with this. People don't live their life with $100,000, $200,000 just sitting in a savings account. So then the question was, what can we invest in? We started chatting to people, and then we really did get hooked on property, as everyone in Australia does.
Hello, it's Beck. Well, like Daria said, we get asked a lot, what do you think of buyer's agents? And Shady and Dave's experience really shows what a great buyer's agent can do. We're talking 5 properties in 8 years. That's just crazy momentum. Recapping on the gold nuggets from this episode before we wrap. First gold nugget is obviously how much momentum you can get from a good buyer's agent. Second gold nugget, Shady and Dave live frugal. Honestly, this is something I see a lot with investors. All of the investors I know, they're not flashy. They're not wearing the nicest clothes, the latest clothes. They're not going on glam holidays. They're very intentional with how they save and spend. Third gold nugget, and I feel like we say this every episode, networks matter. Connecting with other investors helps because you can see what others are doing, you can see what works, you can see what doesn't work, and you can learn from each other. And again, if you don't have a network, reach out. I love talking about this stuff. We'll grab coffee and chat anytime. And then fourth gold nugget, start small. I liked Dave's crypto investment. I'd never thought of that before. If you found this episode interesting, please follow us on Spotify if you haven't already, and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others to find us. And then we're going to have a second episode with Shady and Dave in a few weeks' time, where we talk more about how they actually manage money and have set themselves up to have this level of momentum with their finances.